Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. A man escapes his messy past and buys a peaceful lakeside home, only to ignite a war with a power-hungry HOA and its ruthless leader. What starts with trespassing ends in arson, court battles, and the ultimate fight for freedom. This isn't just property, it's war. It was the second Tuesday of April when I first laid eyes on the place. A cedar-clad lakefront cottage nestled in a cradle of maples, standing like it had always been there, watching over the silent waters of Maple Falls. It wasn't just a house. It was a hard-earned middle finger to my ex-wife, my former life in Atlanta, and 3 years of bleeding alimony and therapy bills. Now it was mine. Every inch of the 3 acres, every rock on the path to the narrow beach, every squirrel dam branch creaking outside the windows. Mine. The realtor, some chipper kid named Zeke with teeth too white to trust, called it a private escape with old bones and modern guts. He wasn't wrong. The original structure dated back to the 80s, but the former owner, some semi-retired orthopedic surgeon, had sunk a fortune into refurbishing it. Vaulted ceilings, reclaimed oak floors, a stone fireplace that probably killed a chimney sweep back in the day, and best of all, that lake view. 100 feet of private shoreline, curving into a quiet cove, hidden from the rest of the world. No docks, no screaming kids, no tourists lugging coolers full of cheap beer. Even better, the place sat outside the grasp of the local HOA, an over-manicured suburban tumor called The Pines at Maple Shores. My land was unincorporated county property, and the title was clean. I triple-checked it. I hired a separate land use attorney just to be sure. I wanted no strings, no neighbors measuring grass height with rulers, no newsletters titled friendly reminders, just peace. For the first few days, I had it. I unpacked what little I brought from Atlanta, strung up a hammock between 2 maples, and spent hours doing nothing but watching the lake catch fire under the sunset. There was a fox I saw twice, a blue heron that stalked the shallows like it owned them. I started sketching plans for the pier. I'd already gotten the permits from the county. A low wooden stretch, minimal impact, far from any shared access. It would be my place to sit, fish, drink, and maybe, just maybe, remember what it felt like to breathe. Then on day 6, the kids showed up. I was in the kitchen, brewing coffee and listening to the creak of the floorboards as the wind picked up outside when I caught movement from the window above the sink. 3 of them, maybe 15 or 16, shirtless and barefoot, lugging inner tubes and Bluetooth speakers, walking straight down my slope like it was a city park. No knock, no call, no guilt. One of them tossed a Slurpee cup into the brush. I stepped outside, mug in hand, and gave a sharp whistle. They froze like raccoons in headlights. "Hey," I said, calm but loud enough to carry. "Where exactly do you think you're going?" One of them, the tallest, with shaggy sun-bleached hair and a no-fear tank top, blinked at me. "The lake. This lake." I pointed to the shoreline behind them. "The one behind my house." He looked confused, like I was speaking Mandarin. "Yeah, man, it's like the beach. We go here all the time." I walked down the slope slowly, deliberately. "No, you don't. Not anymore. This is private property. You're trespassing." "But Karen said," the girl blurted before clamming up. Too late. "Karen," I echoed. "Who's Karen?" I got my answer 30 seconds later. She was wearing a navy blue pantsuit like she was heading to court, a file folder tucked under one arm, her platinum bob unmoving despite the wind. She walked with the entitlement of someone who believed the dirt she stepped on should thank her. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Hello," she said, like I was a waiter who'd just spilled soup in her lap. "You must be new here." "Just moved in," I said, squinting. "And you are?" "Karen Spaulding, president of the Pines at Maple Shores Homeowners Association." "Good for you." She gave a quick plastic laugh, like I'd told a joke she didn't understand. Then her tone shifted. "Just wanted to pop by and clarify something," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the water. "That beach access, while it borders your property, is technically community shoreline. It services the Pines neighborhood. We've always used it." "No," I said, "just that. Cold and clean." She blinked. I let the silence stretch. Then I took a step closer and spoke slowly. "This is private property. My deed includes the shoreline. The county confirmed it. I have exclusive riparian rights. Your kids are trespassing." She smiled again, tighter this time. "Well, I'm sure we can come to some sort of arrangement. It's always been—" "No," I said again. Not interested in arrangements. You're on my land. Get off it. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Her jaw twitched. Are you sure you want to go that route? She said softly, tilting her head. There are ways to handle things cordially, and there are ways that aren't. Get off my property, I repeated, with all the warmth of a tax audit. She turned without another word, snapping her fingers at the teens, who dragged their tubes back up the slope. At the top, she glanced back over her shoulder. This isn't over, she said. But that's where she was wrong, because as far as I was concerned, it hadn't even started yet. The letter came 2 days later, a thick white envelope with a gold-stamped crest that tried way too hard to look official. The return address read, The Pines at Maple Shores HOA Compliance Office. I opened it at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and the vague sense that whatever was inside was going to piss me off. It did. Notice of violation, it began, in bold, like they were a court or a government agency, not just a glorified suburban clique with a budget. The letter accused me of obstructing community shoreline access, interfering with neighborhood recreational privileges, and, my personal favorite, creating visual disharmony through fencing negligence. I didn't even have a fence yet. They included a printed aerial photo of my property, complete with a red circle drawn around the beach. The caption underneath read, Access point obstructed by new owner. I stared at it for a moment, then calmly fed the entire packet through my shredder, one page at a time. The next morning, I spotted them. 2 men. Polo shirts, khakis, clipboards, HOA badges clipped to their belts like they were damn marshals, walking down the slope toward the beach. They carried cameras. One of them was actually tossing beer cans from his backpack into the brush near my shoreline and then photographing them like he'd discovered illegal dumping. I watched from my deck, sipping coffee, not moving. An hour later, they were gone. But not their trash. By midweek, things escalated. I came home from a hardware run to find 2 The Pines at Maple Shores branded lounge chairs set up on my beach, along with a wooden sign staked into the sand. It read, Community Beach Access for residents and guests of the Pines only. The gall was impressive. I dragged the chairs up the hill, stacked them at the edge of my property line, and nailed the sign upside down to a tree next to my driveway. That evening, a silver SUV pulled up as I was grilling a ribeye. It was a man in his 50s, tight polo tucked into even tighter jeans, sunglasses perched like he was in an 80s cop show. He got out holding a kayak paddle. I'm going to leave this down by the water if you don't mind, he said. Easier to launch from there. I do mind, I replied. He blinked. Excuse me, you're standing on private property. I don't care what Karen told you. The shoreline belongs to me. Move your kayak elsewhere. He smiled like I was a confused child. Look, I've lived here 10 years. We've always used that stretch. It's tradition. I pointed to the property marker, a bright orange survey stake that clearly cut off his argument. Tradition doesn't trump the deed, champ. He opened his mouth, then closed it, got back in the SUV, and peeled off. Left a nice arc of gravel spray on my lawn. Later that night, I reviewed the footage from the trail cams I'd set up after the trash incident. 3 different people had walked through the back of my property that day alone. One of them actually stopped to relieve himself behind a tree. Real classy crowd. I called the county sheriff's office. The deputy who answered sounded polite enough, but the moment I mentioned an HOA dispute, his tone changed. Well, sir, he said, sounds like a civil matter. You might want to file a complaint with the county court. Unfortunately, unless there's clear evidence of criminal trespass, we can't do much right now. What about people planting furniture on my land? Still falls under civil. You could ask them to leave, post signage, even pursue a restraining order, but we can't arrest someone for sitting in a chair unless they refuse to leave when asked. So I have to play security guard now? There was a pause. I didn't say that, sir, but unofficially, maybe document everything. You know, just in case. I hung up. Then I went online and ordered 4 new trail cameras, a stack of metal private property no trespassing signs, and a motion-activated floodlight. If the HOA wanted a war, I'd give them one, but on paper, on camera, and within the law. The next day, I found a pamphlet in my mailbox. No return address, just the HOA logo and a glossy title. Protecting Our Lake, a community resource. Inside, a paragraph caught my eye. In the spirit of neighborly cooperation, All residents, including those on the periphery of the Pines, are expected to honor shared shoreline access protocols to promote unity and recreational fairness. I stared at the phrase, "on the periphery," for a long time. That's what I was to them. A fringe dweller, a rogue variable, a threat to the illusion of control they'd built for themselves. I burned the pamphlet in my fire pit that night, and as the flames rose and the wind shifted toward the lake, I could have sworn I heard voices down by the beach, laughing, shouting, splashing. I didn't go down, not that night, but I was already drafting my next move. I built the fence myself. Not all of it, of course. The big parts were done by professionals, but the final touches, the pieces that mattered, those were mine. I chose seasoned oak, pressure-treated, and sealed 3 times over. I didn't want anything flimsy, nothing HOA Karen and her clipboard minions could accuse of violating neighborhood aesthetics. Every plank was aligned, every post reinforced with steel anchors. It wasn't just a barrier, it was a damn declaration. Private property, keep the hell out. I installed 6 trail cameras, all motion-activated, cloud-synced, and labeled "Smile for the Judge" in bright white vinyl just below the lens. At every 50 feet along the fence, I bolted a professionally printed sign. Private beach, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. I didn't go for the cheap tin ones. I got the kind that looked like they came from a federal site. Legal font, border, the works. Then I called in the land surveyor. His name was Marcus, early 60s, former Army engineer, the kind of guy who didn't smile unless absolutely necessary. We walked the full perimeter of my lot with a GPS rover, pounding in updated stakes and photographing each coordinate with time-stamped geotags. I paid extra for notarized documentation and a digital copy of the boundary map. Then I sent it with a polite cover letter to the HOA board's legal representative. Certified mail, signature required. Alongside that, I submitted a formal trespass notice to their office, clearly stating the date, time, and nature of the violations I'd already documented. I included stills from the camera footage, HOA-branded chairs, teens cutting through, and that middle-aged paddle bro hauling a kayak like he owned the damn place. I CC'd the sheriff's office just for flavor. Then I filed for a temporary injunction through the county clerk's office. Emergency relief to prevent members of the Pines HOA from entering my property under the guise of community access. It took me 3 hours, 2 lattes, and a crash. Course in Tennessee property law, but I got it done. The court date was set for the following week. Until then, the HOA was to stay the hell off my land. And yet, the very next morning, someone had zip-tied a new sign to the outer fence, just above the northwest corner where the slope dips. A cheap laminated sheet of paper flapping in the wind. This area is part of the Maple Shores Recreational Buffer Zone. All residents have shared access rights under long-standing tradition and community expectation. Disputes to be resolved via HOA mediation. The Pines Board of Directors. It wasn't even signed. I tore it down and added another sign of my own. Trespassing equally. $500 fine, plus lawsuit. Enforced, documented, recorded. But the message still didn't land. 2 nights later, I caught a group of teenagers with flashlights walking the fence line, trying to spot gaps. I activated the floodlight and stepped onto the back porch with my shotgun. Unloaded, safety on, but it made the point. They scattered like rats. The next day, I visited the county planning office and got confirmation in writing. My land was not part of any public or shared access zone. There were no easements, no buffers, no grandfathered clauses. It was simple, private, tax-paying real estate with riparian rights, granted by the state and uncontested for over 30 years. I highlighted every relevant clause in the document and printed out 5 copies. By Friday, I'd sent a cease and desist letter to the HOA, again through certified mail. I added the documentation from the planning office and a statement from the sheriff's department confirming prior reports. I also included an invoice for property cleaning, $72 itemized for trash removal and minor landscaping damage caused by repeated intrusions. I knew they wouldn't pay it, but I wanted it on record. That evening, while reviewing the camera footage, I caught something new. Karen herself. Red jacket, khaki pants, clipboard under one arm. She stood at the top of the hill for nearly 5 minutes, staring down at the lake like it had personally offended her. Then she snapped a few pictures, scribbled something, and walked away. The following morning, a manila envelope appeared in my mailbox. No stamp, no address, just my name, typed. Inside, a printed invitation to a conflict resolution mediation session scheduled at the HOA clubhouse the following Tuesday. I laughed out loud. Then I took a Sharpie, wrote "Return to sender wrong jurisdiction" in big block letters, and dropped it on the sidewalk in front of their gate. I'd played nice. I'd followed every legal avenue. Now I was going to court, and I wasn't showing up empty-handed. It started with the smell, not the smoke, not yet, but that sickly chemical tang in the air that didn't belong near a lake. I was inside, halfway through reading a property rights case from 2014 just for fun. Yeah, that's where I was at this point in my life, when something hit me, a twitch in the nose, a tightening in the gut. I stood up, walked to the back door, and opened it. Flames. They were small at first, orange fingers licking at the half-built skeleton of the pier. I hadn't even gotten the decking on yet, just the foundational frame, pressure-treated posts cemented into the lake bed, and a small wooden platform stacked with materials nearby. But it was burning. Dry wood, fresh pine, and some kind of accelerant, probably gas or kerosene. Because that fire wasn't normal, I ran for the hose, not because I thought I'd stop it, but because it was the only thing I could do while calling 911. The operator stayed calm. I didn't. "It's arson," I said. "Someone torched my pier. I have cameras. I have everything. Just get someone out here now." The fire didn't last long. My neighbors saw the smoke and came running. One of them, an older guy named Daryl, who lived on the far end of the lake, brought a bucket brigade from his own dock. By the time the fire department arrived, the structure was half charred, the rest soaked and steaming. Nothing spread beyond the pier, thank God. But the message was clear. The sheriff came that night. Different deputy this time. Younger guy, serious face, no small talk. He watched the camera footage with me on the porch, nodding slowly as we rewound and zoomed in. Two figures, black hoodies, black gloves, night vision headlamps. One of them held a red plastic can. The other carried something that looked a hell of a lot like a road flare. And then, bingo, one of them turned toward the camera just enough. Face, half lit, clear enough to match. And I recognized him immediately. Jeremy Lang, mid-30s. HOA board member. I'd seen him at the end of my driveway just 2 weeks ago, pretending to take pictures of a dead tree like he was a damn arborist. In the footage, his face was frozen mid-laugh as he tossed something onto the fire. I looked at the deputy. "Well," I said, "that's going to be awkward at the next HOA brunch." They took the footage, bagged some burned debris for analysis, and promised to open a criminal investigation. Arson, criminal trespass, destruction of private property, maybe conspiracy, depending on who planned it. The next morning, Karen cracked. She didn't know I was standing outside when she pulled up in her white Lexus. Too fast, too loud, like she wanted attention. She parked just outside my fence, stepped out in heels like she was storming a city hall meeting, and began yelling toward my house. "This is a setup," she screamed. "You think this little stunt is going to make people feel sorry for you? You torched your own pier." I walked out onto the porch with a cup of coffee in hand. "Morning, Karen. You're a liar and a manipulator. You're trying to paint us as criminals. It's pathetic." I sipped my coffee. "Cameras say otherwise." "I don't care what your doctored little videos show," she snapped. "We all know what's really happening here. You're trying to destroy this community." I leaned on the porch railing. "No, Karen. I'm just trying to keep you people off my goddamn lawn." She stomped back to her car, throwing one last phrase over her shoulder. "You don't belong here." That part stuck with me. Not because I gave a damn what she thought, but because it confirmed what I'd suspected since day one. This wasn't just about a beach, or a pier, or even access to the lake. It was about control. About someone like me, not born here, not part of their social circle, not eager to bend the knee, daring to own something they wanted to claim as theirs. Karen didn't see a neighbor, she saw a threat. And now that threat had her board member's face caught on camera with a flare in one hand and a felony in the other. By evening, my inbox was full, a county detective reaching out for a formal statement, a call from my lawyer suggesting we file for permanent injunctions against specific HOA board members, and strangely, 2 anonymous voicemails, both male voices, both warning me, subtly, to drop the charges and let it go. One even called it an unfortunate misunderstanding. Unfortunate my ass. I forwarded everything to the sheriff and sat down at my desk with a bottle of scotch. My hand hovered over the keyboard before I started typing. formal lawsuit filing draft, property damage, civil harassment, criminal conspiracy. The fire hadn't scared me, but it had changed something. No more polite letters, no more warnings, no more signs. This was war. The thing about fights with HOAs is that they rarely know when to quit. You'd think a flaming pier and one of their own caught on camera would at least earn me a week of silence, a pause, something. But no, they shifted tactics. When fire didn't work, they turned to paperwork. It started innocently enough. A white SUV parked outside my driveway. A different one this time. 2 men in khaki slacks and matching blue polo shirts got out, holding clipboards and ID badges. I watched from my porch, arms crossed, as they walked to the gate and rang the bell like this was a damn pizza delivery. "Can I help you?" I asked through the speaker. "Mr. Talton," one of them asked. "We're with the Maple County Department of Environmental Quality. We received a complaint regarding unregulated drainage on your property that may be affecting the lake ecosystem." I nearly laughed. "From who?" He hesitated. "We can't disclose the source, but we're obligated to follow up." Of course you are, I thought. And of course the source rhymes with barren. I let them in. I had nothing to hide. I'd done everything by the book. All drainage had been inspected when I bought the place, and the only runoff was natural slope water from the hill behind the house. They walked the property, took photos, made notes. The younger one climbed halfway down the embankment toward the water line and called back up. Sir, you aware there's a pipe back here?" I frowned. "A pipe?" "Yeah, looks like a runoff line. Old PVC. Doesn't match the newer infrastructure." I walked down with them, and sure enough, half buried behind some brush and running along the far side of the property line was a grimy, algae-covered drain pipe that stuck out into the shallows. It was trickling something, cloudy, slightly yellow water, not enough to make a scene, but enough to stink. "I've never seen that before," I said truthfully. The inspector nodded. "Based on sediment buildup, it's been active for a while. You didn't install this?" "No, never touched it. Never even noticed it. They took water samples, marked GPS coordinates, and said they'd follow up with a full analysis." As they left, one of them added almost casually, "If this is on your parcel and it's illegal, there could be fines involved." I smiled. Good thing it might not be on my parcel then. The moment they left, I grabbed my surveyor's map, double-checked the coordinates, and hiked back out to the pipe with a bright orange flag. I stuck it in the ground exactly at the property line. The pipe? It started about 4 feet on their side of it. I called Marcus, the same guy who did my boundary survey. He came out the next day with his fancy rover again, confirmed everything, and gave me a notarized addendum to the original report. The pipe originated from HOA-controlled land. It got better. A week later, the environmental report came back. The water from the pipe tested positive for trace levels of lawn chemicals, phosphate cleaners, and, here's the kicker, fecal coliform bacteria. Someone somewhere had been illegally routing gray water or runoff into the lake, probably for years. I filed a formal complaint with the County Environmental Board, attached my survey, and sent copies to the sheriff, the county commissioner's office, and, because I'm a generous man, to the HOA themselves. No response for 3 days. Then Karen snapped again. This time she went digital. A post appeared on the Pines at Maple Shore's Facebook page, a private group, but someone leaked me screenshots. The post was a 1,000-word screed accusing me of ecological terrorism, manipulating evidence, and using county officials as pawns in a personal vendetta. She even hinted that I may have tampered with old infrastructure to frame the community, a bold claim for a woman whose board had a confirmed arsonist on it, but the tide was turning. A second post appeared 2 days later, this time from one of the residents. It was short, simple, a photo of the pipe, the survey stake, and the caption, "This isn't his pipe. Why are we defending this?" Then another. And another. Turns out HOA members don't love paying dues for legal fees or getting dragged into EPA investigations. One of the board members resigned quietly. Another stopped showing up to meetings. Rumors swirled that the HOA treasury was down over 10 grand in emergency legal consulting fees, and people started talking, whispering, sharing screenshots, email chains. It was unraveling, but not fast enough. That pipe was the opening. Now I was going for the damn artery. I scheduled a meeting with my attorney and began drafting the civil suit. not just for trespassing or harassment, but for willful environmental violations and property devaluation. Karen wanted a war of attrition. I was preparing an airstrike. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not physically, though the AC was set like someone was trying to preserve meat, but in energy, detached, sterile. No neighborhood drama, no porch glares or passive-aggressive flyers, just law, marble floors, binders, the soft hiss of whispered objections. It had taken almost 6 weeks to get here. 6 weeks of compiling documents, notarizing surveys, cataloging security footage, and making copies. So many copies. My attorney, a woman named Paige Wilkes, showed up with 2 rolling suitcases and the confidence of someone who'd buried bigger snakes than Karen Spaulding. HOA showed up with 4 people. Karen, of course, wearing a dark gray suit like she thought this was Congress. Jeremy Lang, the amateur arsonist trying his best not to make eye contact with me. A younger woman I didn't recognize, probably another. Board member and their lawyer, a man who looked like his soul had been dry cleaned. We were here on multiple fronts: the civil suit I'd filed for trespassing, harassment, and property damage, the county's environmental action against the HOA for illegal drainage, and the preliminary hearing for criminal charges tied to the arson incident. The judge had agreed to consolidate certain hearings for efficiency. It was a circus of bureaucracy, but I had front row seats and the receipts. We opened with property boundaries. Paige laid out the cadastral maps, the GPS-stamped survey data, the photos of the trespassing signs, the notarized land use confirmations from the county. Karen's lawyer tried to argue historical precedent of access and community tradition, which the judge immediately shut down. "This isn't folklore," he said dryly. "This is land law." Then came the footage. We played the night vision camera video in full. The court watched Jeremy and his buddy walk onto my property, pour accelerant, light the pier, and jog off laughing like frat boys. Jeremy's lawyer tried the old mistaken identity card until we froze the frame on his half-lit face, side by side with his HOA profile photo from their own website. The judge didn't say anything. He just stared at the screen, then turned toward the defense. "Your move," he said flatly. Karen lost it during the environmental hearing. The moment the inspector testified that the pipe originated on HOA-maintained land and was pumping out water with traces of lawn fertilizer, septic bacteria, and phosphates, she stood up mid-hearing and snapped, "This is a political attack. He's weaponizing agencies against us." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Spaulding, sit down, or I'll hold you in contempt." She sat, but her face, pure white fury wrapped in embarrassment. She was losing control of the narrative. Worse, she was losing the room. We introduced the cease and desist letters, the invoices I'd sent for damage and cleanup, the evidence of their Facebook posts accusing me of eco-terrorism, and a sworn affidavit from the surveyor confirming the illegal drain was never visible from my side of the property. Even HOA members had begun flipping. One submitted a written statement confessing to knowledge of coordinated pressure tactics initiated by board leadership. I didn't look at Karen while it was read. I didn't need to. I could feel her unraveling from across the room. The prosecutor presented charges for Jeremy and the second man: felony arson, trespassing, and conspiracy. Bail was denied for the second guy, who had prior. Jeremy was released under house arrest with a GPS ankle monitor. Karen, not so lucky. Turns out her signature appeared on a falsified maintenance report submitted to the county, one that claimed the drainage pipe had been inactive since 2009, a forged signature on an official environmental compliance form. That's when they cuffed her. Right there in court. No warning, no drama, just the soft click of steel and the squeak of her chair as she stiffened, still trying to keep her chin high like this was all beneath her. I watched her go without a word. Paige just nodded slightly, as if checking off a box on a to-do list. The judge's final ruling in the civil portion was just as satisfying. The HOA was ordered to pay $850,000 in damages and legal costs. All members of the Pines HOA board were prohibited from contacting me or approaching my property within Foster 50 feet void. The shoreline was officially registered as Hort's closed private property, with exclusive riparian rights confirmed under state law. The HOA was issued a formal county citation for environmental negligence. Civil harassment protections were granted. Any further interference would trigger automatic criminal charges. It was done. Almost. As I walked out of that courtroom, past reporters and residents pretending not to stare, I felt lighter. Not happy. Not yet. But sharp. Clean. Like a wound finally starting to close. But I wasn't going back to hide. I had plans. And they involved a pier, a flagpole, and a very specific sign I'd already designed. The silence was deafening. Not the kind you get late at night or after a storm, but the kind that wraps around a place when the noise of control disappears. When those who once barked orders and threats find themselves removed, stripped of power and relevance. I stood on my beach. My beach, the sand still bearing the blackened memory of the fire months earlier, but now clean, raked, and peaceful. The pier was finally finished. Treated lumber, steel brackets, a full 35 feet extending into the lake like a declaration. At the edge of the platform, a black metal pole now flew the flag I'd been holding onto for just this occasion. Yellow background, coiled rattlesnake. The words, "Don't tread on me," snapping crisply in the breeze. Below it, a polished wooden sign screwed into the post. Hand-carved lettering. Property closed. For access, contact Maple County Court. Spoiler, you won't get it. Let them chew on that. The installation crew had been local, guys from a nearby town who'd heard about the court case. One of them, a burly contractor named Leon, had shaken my hand hard enough to nearly dislocate my shoulder. "You're a legend around here now," he said, grinning. "You took down the pines." I wasn't sure how I felt about that. I hadn't done it for fame. I'd done it because I was done being pushed. The fallout was still happening, slow and delicious. Karen was suspended from the HOA presidency within 48 hours of her arrest. Her mugshot made the front page of the local weekly, and by the next board meeting, attended by less than a dozen shell-shocked residents, she was officially voted out. Some people tried to play neutral. Others claimed they'd always had concerns. Typical. 2 more board members resigned voluntarily, citing mental health strain and irreconcilable differences. Translation: they didn't want subpoenas. The HOA insurance provider opened an internal investigation, especially after I filed a lien for unpaid judgment. From what my lawyer told me, there were whispers that premiums were about to spike for the whole neighborhood. Massively. That tends to happen when your HOA gets slapped with an environmental violation and loses a high-profile lawsuit in open court. I watched from a distance as neighbors started quietly peeling off HOA decals from their mailboxes and front gates. One woman even came to my fence, a former Karen loyalist, and left a box with 2 wine bottles and a card that just said, "For what it's worth, I was wrong." I didn't reply, but I drank the wine, eventually. The most satisfying moment came 3 weeks later when I got a letter in the mail. It was from the county recorder's office, confirmation that my parcel had been formally updated in the public record with all judgments attached, restraining orders, environmental rulings, private ownership affirmed. It was done. No more signs. No more chairs showing up in the night. No more community access lies. I'd even started thinking about building a boathouse. Nothing huge, just enough to store a kayak, some gear, maybe a bench. I wanted the lake to be used the right way. My way, quiet, respectful, free of manufactured rules and board votes. But perhaps the most unexpected thing to come out of all of it was the shift in how I saw this place. At first, it had been an escape, a bunker, a post-divorce exile where I could lick my wounds and forget the years I'd wasted trying to please everyone but myself. Now it felt like a conquest, a home I'd fought for, bled for, defended. There was still cleanup to do, physically and otherwise. But I slept easier. I walked the shoreline in the early morning mist and didn't flinch at shadows anymore. The cameras were still there. I wasn't a fool. But they were quieter now. Fewer alerts, less motion. Even the raccoons seemed to have more respect these days. I'd heard Karen made bail, temporarily. She was supposedly staying with a cousin 2 towns over, pending further hearings. Her Lexus had vanished from the neighborhood, and nobody had seen her at the clubhouse since. Her name was being quietly scrubbed from newsletters, meeting minutes, HOA bylaws. History was being rewritten in real time. Funny how that works when power changes hands. As for Jeremy Lang, the arsonist in denial, he'd filed some kind of appeal, claiming his mental state had been affected by community stress. His lawyer floated a plea deal. I didn't care what happened to him in the end. He'd already burned more than my peer. He'd scorched the credibility of the very board he tried to protect. I poured a glass of whiskey that night and sat at the edge of the pier, bare feet dangling over the calm black water. The lake reflected the moon like a perfect mirror, disturbed only by the occasional ripple from fish or wind. I let it wash over me. No threats, no noise, just ownership, uncontested, legally affirmed, permanently mine. And in the distance, beyond the trees, the HOA clubhouse sat dark. For once, they were the ones afraid to knock. It was almost fall when I got the final letter. A thick envelope, cream-colored, with the Maple County seal pressed into the flap. I opened it slowly, sitting at my kitchen table as golden light bled through the wide, lake-facing windows. The letter was short, bureaucratic, and almost boring. A formal notice confirming the permanent injunctions had been filed into the county land registry. The last line was the one that stuck with me. Property designated as exclusive private riparian zone. No HOA encumbrance applicable, now or hereafter. Now or hereafter. That was the legal version of forever. I set the letter down and let the silence settle around me like a warm coat. This wasn't just a victory, it was a closing. A hard, clean period at the end of a sentence that had gone on far too long. But endings always bring echoes. Karen's trial was still pending. Her charges now included not just falsifying county documents and overseeing illegal environmental dumping, but obstruction of justice after investigators found that she'd attempted to delete HOA board emails following the arson incident. The DA had enough to drag it into a full jury trial, and from what I'd heard, they intended to make her an example. Jeremy had pled out. 2 years probation, fines, mandatory counseling, and a ban from serving on any homeowners association board for 10 years. Not sure if that last part came from the court or just some cosmic sense of justice. The HOA itself? Gutted. The board had been reduced to 3 members, none of whom wanted the presidency. There were talks of dissolving the association altogether, though that would require a vote from 70% of homeowners. Rumors flew like mosquitoes in the summer about who would sell, who would sue, who wanted out. I watched it all from my deck, mostly in silence. I had no interest in rejoining the world of neighborhood politics, but I was no longer the outsider. Not anymore. A few neighbors had started stopping by. Some came with baked goods, others with hesitant apologies. There were clumsy conversations about how things got out of hand, and you know how Karen could be. I didn't hold grudges, but I didn't forget either. Most of them meant well. Some just wanted to be on the right side of the new power balance. I nodded. I listened. I kept my boundaries. They finally understood what that word meant. One afternoon, a woman named Jean, mid-40s, mother of 2, formerly one of Karen's staunchest defenders, asked if she could bring her son down to the beach. Just for a minute, she said. He always loved the water. I told her the truth. The beach is closed, not just legally, spiritually. She smiled, nodded, and didn't argue. The fence remained, the cameras too, not because I feared more conflict, but because I respected the line. I'd fought hard for it. That beach wasn't just land. It was the embodiment of a principle. This far, no farther. There were days when I thought back to Atlanta, to the years I spent in a nice house, in a nice neighborhood, living a very nice lie. Controlled, restrained, shrinking under expectations I'd never agreed to. Now, each morning began with a walk to the end of the pier, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with a whiskey glass from the night before, always barefoot, always quiet. I'd see the sun break over the far ridge, the lake lighting up like molten glass, and I'd breathe deep. No walls, no HOA, no board meetings or threats or letters signed sincerely the Pines. Just me, my land, my rules. Once, I caught a new couple driving slowly past the edge of my property, pointing at the pier. They must have been prospective buyers looking at homes down the road. The woman leaned out the window and asked, "Is that the community dock?" I smiled. "No," I said, "it's mine." She laughed, like she thought I was joking. I didn't correct her. Some things don't need explaining. Some boundaries, once drawn, speak for themselves.